Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Strategy Game Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Shippey, and I'm super excited to be here with you today as we talk a little bit about your team and what it looks like to stay connected to your team. So, in a perfect world, if everything ran according to plan, you wouldn't have to figure out what you need to do to make people do things, right? They would just do them. But we know that things just don't happen that way, that it requires you to figure out how to humanly connect with your team in order to be able for them to move forward, right? And that's a big part of the puzzle. So we can say that maybe our team just isn't motivated, or they keep getting frustrated, or they're roadblocked, or they have too many hurdles, or they have too many things on their to-do list. But really at the core, connection is what drives productivity. So I'll say that again, connection is what drives productivity. So I want to ask you today, are you connected to your team? And we're going to look at a few ways, a few things that you can do to connect with your team. And then we're also going to review some questions that you can ask to reflect. So if you don't have a piece of paper or a notebook in front of you, I would really encourage you to grab your journal, a piece of paper, and let's just work through this together. So let's just pretend like I'm right there with you, sitting next to you, and we're thinking about what your team structure currently looks like, and if you're able to really sufficiently connect with them and able to move the needle forward in your organization. And this can be your business or this can be your nonprofit, because they are a large part of your fuel, as we've talked about. And so if they're not connected to you and they're not connected to the larger purpose, then they lose momentum just like you do. So when you think of Jim Collins and Good to Great, when he talks about the flywheel and the doom loop, so the flywheel is really what moves the momentum, right? What drives the organization moving forward. And there are a lot of different things that cause that flywheel to go up and over and circle back, right? Again and again. And so your team is part of that, and being connected to them is part of that. And when they feel connected, they want to work harder because they see the larger purpose. They feel like they're a part of it, and they know that you genuinely care about their progress. So one thing I will say is that people are extremely perceptive, whether we think they are or not. They notice if we really care. And if we don't really care, they really don't buy in. There's no ownership. So in order to effectively execute on this strategy of being connected to your team, you have to actually care. And if you don't actually care, I want you to ask yourself, why don't I actually care? Is it the wrong people? Are they perhaps in the wrong seats? Are there any other blockers that you're experiencing? Maybe, go back to our strategy masterclass course on the breakthrough map, where we talk about the things that you've been through your life, the experiences you've been through, and how they've shaped you. So is there a particular experience that you've had, maybe a negative experience with a previous boss, or a work experience, or a risk you took and you got shut down? Is there some kind of, we call those spirit crushing moments? Is there a spirit crushing moment or moments that is blocking you from actually genuinely connecting and caring about your team? And if there is, then that's where you need to start. So I would recommend that you go through the breakthrough map part of the strategy masterclass and get yourself clear and free first, so that you can then be available to connect with your team, so that you can move your flywheel forward and create momentum within your organization. You see how all of these things are connected and how important this is. So here are 3 ways tactically that you can connect with your team. But again, I'm going to say this with a caveat: if you haven't yet actually gone back and done the personal work to evaluate yourself and why you're not connected to the team, you need to do that first, because even if you do these 3 things, it's not really going to matter. So tactically, after you're in a healthy place and able to connect, the number one thing that you should do is schedule weekly reviews. Now, I don't know if you've got a time where you already do this. You might have part of your team, but I know at the Marketing Engine team, we have weekly all team calls. So this means all hands on deck. We are all there. We are all present on Zoom. Put your screens on, show up. I know if you're a distributed team, there can be a tendency to just keep the screens off, mute the mic, whatever it is. But I think that you've got to ask everybody to really show up and be present. And maybe it's just an hour. Don't make it too long. We don't want to go on and on, but they know that when they show up, they can expect an effective meeting where you're also going to spend some time connecting. So something that we do in the beginning of our meetings is just spend time sharing a personal and professional win. So everybody goes around and has a chance to share, what does your week look like? Like, give us just a little bit of a headline, so to speak, on something that you consider to be a personal win and something you consider in your work as a professional win. So it challenges them. They have to step outside and report to the team in a way that's personal. And I think that's really good. And allow yourself to be human on those calls. So you can't be a robot and be a leader. It's just not going to work. You have to be a person. They have to see that you're a person. And so if you laugh or you make a joke or you share something personal about your week, right, that you did with your family or your kids, they have to know that you're a human, and they have to connect with you on that level. So I would encourage you to start your meetings with that level of connection. The second thing that's really effective, set calendar reminders to connect one-on-one with your team. So I think that, as a leader, we can get so tied into what's going on in the day-to-day, and it can be hard for us to remember to just connect specifically one-on-one with our team. But it's so powerful when we do. Think about the last time that someone reached out to you and said, hey, how are you doing? You just came to mind today. And I thought about this, and this for you. I hope you have a great day. Or something just random, but where someone saw you. You felt acknowledged. You just felt seen in that moment. And you thought, I'm so thankful that they thought of me and that they shared that. So you can do the same thing with your team. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. All it has to take is intention. So with all of these things, I just want to preface it with this. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It just takes intention. And intention really is the foundation of great leadership, right? So that's what we're cultivating as leaders, and that's what we're cultivating with our teams. So if this is a problem and you feel like this isn't a part of your natural rhythm, then set a calendar reminder literally to pop up on your phone to say, hey, connect with so-and-so today, connect with Sam. And then it can be a quote that you read that you loved. It can be, something that you did today that made you think of them. It can be an audio message. I'm a big fan of audio messages. Those that know me are probably laughing right now. I send a lot of them because I can be walking, I can be doing something. They can hear my tone of voice when I talk, when I speak. And I think that makes a big difference in terms of connection. So I think when people can hear your tonality and hear how you're saying things, that really helps to further solidify, and they feel like you're right there with them. So if you can, just drop them an audio message. There's plenty of apps where you can record them and save them and text them. Super easy. You can do it on the go, so there's no excuse as to why you can't get it done. All it takes is just being intentional and encouraging that person, saying, hey, how are you doing? Or here's a tip I thought of for you. I'm for you. Let me know if there's anything that I can do, to support you. And number 3, schedule quarterly events to check in with team members. So this would be just a little bit of a bigger picture. So this is different than just the one-on-one. This is different than the weekly reviews, the rhythm where you're connecting with them personally and seeing what's going on in their lives and listening to them, right? So this is quarterly, you're zooming out. And this might be, you might have performance reviews in your organization, but this is a little bit different. This is really just a check-in. So this might be a lunch that you have scheduled. This might be something fun, a fun event that you pull everybody together and you just actually zoom out and you talk about what's going on in their lives and just connect with them personally. And you talk both, right? So you talk a little bit of personal, you talk a little bit of work. So this might look like maybe it's a couple hour retreat that you're doing quarterly where you're going off site and you're just, having lunch and then you're, doing some kind of activity, whatever you can do to bring everybody together and connect I think it's really important on that quarterly basis, because then they're seeing you make time as a leader for all the things, right? So the fun, the connection, and then also use this time to share any updates on the vision of the company and the direction where you're going, so that they can see the forward motion and momentum of what's happening and what's to come. So here's a couple questions for reflection as we wrap up this episode. Number one, as a team, where are you filling in the holes for your teammates with things that they should be doing that they're not? So these are a couple key questions. As a leader, you're responsible ultimately for plugging the holes, right? And if there are some inefficiencies in your team, then you need to see that. And a lot of times, I don't know if any of you have read the book Codependent No More. If you haven't, you should. Melody Beattie. It's life-changing on all fronts, personally and professionally. So are there any holes or places where you're enabling people to not do their jobs? So that's that question said another way. And if so, write down their names right now, and write down how you're filling in the holes specifically and what you need to do to stop. Number two, where are your blind spots as a leader, and what can you do to work on them? So we all have blind spots, right? We are not perfect humans. We are always going to have faults. We're always going to be identifying and working on some things. But the problem comes when we don't see our blind spots. We don't ask others to identify them. So think of that person in your life that you have, that you trust, that has good discernment and wisdom, and can guide you, and just have a blind spot check-in. So you can schedule just a blind spot check-in. I've done this with friends quite a few times over the years, like, hey, what am I not seeing here about myself that I need to know? Business coaches, obviously, they can be your trusted sources as well. Or it can be just somebody who you see in your life that knows you and won't let you get away with anything. That's the key. And I would encourage you to have this in all areas of your life. So if you have a business coach that's great with identifying your blind spots, but you don't have somebody in your life personally that's calling these things out, I would encourage you to get that person, because your personal life, whether you want to see it or not, does impact how far you can go and grow when it comes to your movement or your business. So make sure that you've got your blind spots covered. And by that, I don't mean that you have to fix them immediately, or you have to know what they are immediately, or you're expected to see them. You can't, because they're blind spots. But just make sure that you have that person personally, and you have that person professionally that's going to call out your blind spots and tell you how it is when you need to hear it. Number three, what routines or tools can you put into place to help you become intentional about incorporating self-reflection into your normal processes? So this is something we focus on tremendously when it comes to the Strategy Masterclass. It is critical that you have time for self-reflection, self-awareness. If you don't, you will not grow. It will not happen. This is one of the most important things. So self-awareness leads to greater intentionality and discipline, which leads to progress and momentum, right? So let me say that one more time. Let me see if I can remember what I just said. Self-awareness leads to cultivating intentionality and discipline, and that leads to movement and momentum in your organization. I said it a little bit differently, but you get the point. That is the order of how these things go. And so making sure that you have routines or tools that you can put in place that ground you and force you to have time for reflection in your normal processes. Again, if you have trouble with this part, you can go through the Strategy Masterclass, the habits and routines module, right? So the breakthrough map we mentioned in terms of that, really reflecting on your life and getting clear and removing any emotional blocks or holdbacks or spirit crushing moments. But the productivity map part of the Strategy Masterclass focuses on habits and routines. So if you feel stuck there, we have something for you. Number four, if you're able to execute on these things, how will it impact your team? So ultimately, at the end of the day, A lot of us, most of us are doing this to create impact, right? That's why we work so hard. That's why we wake up early. That's why we stay up late. That's why we sacrifice, because we want to create impact. We want it to matter. It's part of our purpose and what drives us. So if you're able to execute on these things, connecting with your team, right? Scheduling the team time, the one-on-one time, you're able to stop allowing people to not do their jobs, blind spot focus, right? Coverage, and become more intentional, add more time for self-reflection. How will it impact your team? Think about all those things. You can literally sit down for 15 minutes with a blank sheet of paper after this episode, listen back, and create a plan, and it will move the needle significantly for your organization. So hope this was encouraging to you today. Thanks so much for listening in. We love serving you. I will drop any links to the Strategy Masterclass in the show notes, and we will talk to you soon.